Minnesota. This is Christie Thompson with Christie Legal. I am a divorce and custody mediator and paralegal for Minnesota. I help people divorce and handle custody cases in a way that saves them tens of thousands of dollars and at least 6 months in the court process. One of the parts of divorcing is the house. And sometimes people are thinking about things with the house even before they pull the trigger on divorcing. And so, let's talk first about mortgage stuff when you're still married. And so with me today, I have Vilay or V, and she is a mortgage banker. And V, why don't you tell everybody about yourself a little bit, and then I'll ask you your first question.
Yeah, my name is vilay.lyangeles from US Bank Mortgage. I just go by V. Most people, that's what they call me. And I've been in lending over 7-8 years now. So just here to help Christy here a little bit and her audience and my audience, obviously, about divorce and separations, or even like the refinance process and the financial piece when couples are either coming together or going separately. So
Awesome. Thanks, V. And so my first question for you is, how does being married affect your ability to refinance the mortgage?
yeah, so when you have a partner and your husband and wife, everything starts to become joint. So when you're working on your financials, everything is pretty much together. So a lot of times when people are saying they want to buy a house and they're buying together, or they're wanting to come together into one house, we look at all their income, but we also look at all their debts together. So it's no longer one of those things where you're just separated, where they're not looking at income or debt separately.
All right. And so how does it affect if just one party has a bad credit score?
Yeah, so we do see that often. Sometimes we have one partner who doesn't have, really good credits and the other one does, so it does affect you and your qualification based on what we're trying to get you approved for. So it just depends of, if you have too much collections, or it can even be like maybe you've done bankruptcy before and you pass, life, and that hasn't dropped off or things like that. That does pop up in your credit report, and it does affect your finances later on when you try to buy a house together with your partner after you get married with them. So, and obviously those are not things maybe some couples disclose it, and some are not comfortable disclosing it, depending on how they want their finance done or how they handle their finance, either separately or together. And sometimes that could be one of those moments where we have to have those really hard talks with a lot of our couples about disclosing things together. So that could be another hardship when it comes to getting together.
Yeah. And have you ever had anybody come to you and they're married, but they're not with the person anymore, like not communicating with the person anymore, but they're not divorced yet, and they would like to refinance the mortgage on the house? And how does that work?
Yeah, we get quite often a lot of those clients that's walking into us and talking to us, about their situation of they're still married. They may not be talking, they're living in separate housing. And maybe it's been like 3 or 4 years. And we come to find out because we're asking the question if they're still legally married. Doing a mortgage is a legal transaction. So we will ask you, if you are single or married, or however you file your taxes. So those would be definitely questions that we will be asking. A lot of times, it's one of those things where it's really hard for partners to disclose that they're no longer either, they don't want to say the divorce when technically speaking they're not divorced, they're just separated. So in transaction like that, we consider you married but separated. That's how we have the transaction done. And then when that's separated, we still need to have a separation agreement from the court, to be filed, just like a divorce, in order for us to move forward.
Okay, so if you're married and you're not divorced, then you either need to have a separation agreement that has been signed by a court, um, or do you that like if you aren't planning on getting like legally separated, then what? Would the other party need to sign off on something?
Yes, you still have to sign off. So let's say one person wants to stay on the mortgage and the second person wants to be removed, a title, they still have to be agreements to be signed off from the mortgage legally to get removed. So, the thing that we always say in mortgage is, it takes two to buy, but it also, it takes you could be one person and still buy the house, and it's still gonna be two title would still be for married people together. But on the other case is if you're still married and you're not trying to keep the other person on, you still have to have them signed to just remove them. It's not as easy as everyone makes seem like it is. It's not easy to remove. So it's a process.
Yeah, so if just one party is, trying to buy a house and get a mortgage on that home, and they're, still married, then will the other party sign some kind of release or acknowledgement or something that like, oh, I know my spouse has signed this mortgage?
Yeah. So when people sometimes, I mean, we've seen where, people come in and, they don't disclose that they still own the title of the both of them, but we do find out because we do title search. So within the title search, we find out that the secondary person, like the partner, is still on the title. So in order for something like that to happen, even if they just had a documentation that's not legalized or that's not stamped through the court, we still can't just remove them. They obviously have to show up a title to sign to get removed. And so that way we can record it the correct way. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, that's really complicated. So when you're still married and you're trying to refi the house, um, and you're not communicating with the other person. Now I'm going to talk for a few minutes about when you're getting divorced and you want to refinance the house. And there are a couple of ways to go with that. So if you guys are getting along, fairly well, and you would like to do an amicable joint divorce process, which is what I help people with, then you can, go ahead and refinance that home. Both of you are going to have to be involved in it in some way, just like because you're still married again. But you guys can just tell me, like, Jim is refinancing the house into his name only. And then I'm going to write in the divorce documents that, Jim is now responsible for the mortgage. And then we're going to wait to find out what the new mortgage information is, for the divorce documents. Now, if you guys are like kind of amicable, but not that amicable, and like one of you is going to refinance the house, but you don't know which one, and you don't know if you're going to qualify for the mortgage, and so then that's when it gets hairy. And so the first thing I'm going to ask you guys to do is whoever thinks they want to refinance the mortgage into his or her name only, I'm going to offer you a referral to a mortgage banker such as B. And I'm going to actually ask you, have you talked to a mortgage banker? Do you know for sure that you can refinance the house's mortgage into your name only? Because a lot of people just think that they're on the mortgage, so then they can just kind of remove the other person from the mortgage magically while waving a wand or something, and then they can just stay on the mortgage. But that's totally not how it works. When you qualified for that mortgage, you both, were involved in qualifying for that mortgage. So if you're not going to have both parties liable, then you do need to have it refinanced. Occasionally, you can have a mortgage assumed. And V, can you tell us about when you're divorcing how, what is the process of having a mortgage assumed, and what types of people can have the mortgage assumed?
Yeah, there is some properties out there. I know I think I had a transaction with the VA before, for veterans. And they can assume properties a lot easier, versus like when it's, especially with family and things like that. Like if someone was gone in a war and something happened and they couldn't come back and assume, the wife could assume the property, because there's always, um, they always prepare the paperwork, to make sure that they could take over if something does happen to them. Or, like if your spouse is a law enforcement and things like that. I know that's a lot easier to do. But when it comes to a case of divorce, a separation is very different. When you assume the mortgage, it's a lot harder that way. So I think when it's in the case of death, if you could prove it, a death certificate, maybe there is a will, something like that, things are a lot easier legally. Or some people still go through probate and things like that, and it's a lot easier to get that done that way. So as long as everything is kind of in order that way, you can prove with the death certificate and everything. Or if there is a will, you know, sometimes it could be, I forgot what it was that there's like an estate kind of thing set up or something like that for properties ahead of time. Sometimes they have things like that set up too, previously before anything happened, then a lot of times whoever is on those documentation can assume properties too. So
Oh yeah, when the house is in a trust, right?
yes, that's it. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so people who are divorcing, then pretty much there's no way for one of the two people to just assume that mortgage then, right?
No, no. Very
Oh,
different than if someone is like in a situation of becoming a widow or something like that. Yeah.
oh, right. Yep. When I was widowed back in 2009, yep, I just assumed the mortgage, I guess, because my late husband was not going to be paying on it anymore.
Exactly. Yeah, because it's a lot easier for you to use a death certificate and say, you know, this is what happened, right? Like due to whatever happened, then this is why I'm assuming the mortgage. But if it's not the case, you can't really do that. So if you're
Yeah.
coming to us and you're going to tell, eventually when people come to us, they're going to tell us, well, we're getting divorced, or like we're getting separated. We're not living together. We haven't lived together for 5 years. So when you're saying that to us, this is kind of how we know the solution to help you.
Yeah, you we should always to be honest, because we can only give you appropriate help if we have all the information. And so when you are getting divorced and one party wants to refinance the mortgage into his or her name, can you tell me, V, a little bit about how you determine if just one person's going to qualify?
Yeah, so when they're going through that separation situation, we always look at to see how much is left on their mortgage. And we also make sure that the one person who decides to stay on the mortgage based on the divorce decree or things like that, we need to make sure they have enough income to cover the entire amount that, is on the divorce documentation saying they're taking over this loan amount. So as long as if the loan amount that's left on the house, right? Let's just say it's like an example of 150,000. If the spouse is staying in there have enough money and the debt to income is not too high, they qualify on their own, then they can get the home refinanced under their name. If they don't have enough income, they're gonna either find a co-borrower or co-signer or something. They won't be able to do on their own. Either that, most of the time they sell the house and split the sell the price 50-50 for each one of the parties.
Yeah. And so I had been told that kind of a rule of thumb is that you need to earn 3 times the amount of the mortgage payment. Is that
Correct. Yep.
okay? Good. It's good to check my information every now and then. And so for instance, like when I send a client to you and say, they have the 150,000 mortgage and their monthly payment at the current interest rate is going to be, say, $1,000. So then they would need to earn at least $3,000 a month to get a
In order to
mortgage.
cover. Correct. Yep.
All right. And then, so another factor that comes in with divorce is, sometimes there have been stay-at-home moms or occasionally stay-at-home dads. And so they're not, earning their own income. And so they're going to get child support and spousal maintenance. And so can you tell me first, what are the rules around counting child support as income?
Yeah, so a lot of times people think that that's well, it depends which way you're looking at it. So if the person is actually doing the buying and they're either getting child support taken away from the payroll, then that's considered a deduction, right? So that's a debt actually to that person. If it's the opposite, let's just say an example of a woman and husband divorced, the woman is the one who's actually receiving child support from the other spouse. If they want to add that child support to make the income look, better in order to qualify for something, bigger, a better price for a home from her and her children, then that could be used as income additional to it. That's kind of how that works. So we just have to get a letter from child support showing how much she's getting consistently. And we also check to see to make sure that the kids are, within like the 3 years going forward, that they're still going to receive that income. Because if they're not receiving income coming forward for the next 3 years, we can't use that income. So
Yeah, and so in case you guys didn't catch that, so really important things are that you already need to be receiving the child support in order for it to count. And do
mhm.
you need to be receiving the child support already for like 1 month or 3 months or?
I would say at least 2 months ahead of time so that we can use it. But a lot of times, as long as we show a letter that you are getting consistently, they're looking for a continuance. That's what they're looking for. So if we could continue, let's say the child's like, let's just put a number 10. Let's just say the child's 10-year-old. And now we're going to look at it. They're going to get child support until they turn 18. So we have 8 more years to receive child support. So let's say this person's getting $800 every month. Then going forward, we can use the 800 consistently. That's how that works.
All right, yeah. So the length of the child support is the most important.
That's the
Okay.
most important piece. Yeah. So let's just say this year the person says, "Oh, well, I finally went to court, whatever. We had mediation. Now he agreed to send me $800 every single month, and I started like mid May or whatever. So counting May going forward. That's how they do it.
Yeah, okay. And now let's talk about spousal maintenance, what used to be called alimony.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so for the different types of loans, how long do you have to have received the spousal maintenance for it to count as income when refining the mortgage?
Yeah, so for refinance mortgage, for spousal maintenance, I always tell people as long as you have something that shows that you've been at least getting it for a couple years, that's really important. That's going to help us, to be able to determine, but it really depends on the programs that they go into too. So we'll have to look to see if they either go conventional or FHA. They have different laws based on those two programs. So, but I always
Okay.
tell people it's like if you have, let's say spousal maintenance has been coming in for at least 2 years, it looks like a very good sturdy income. So if it's very sturdy for 2 years, we already know going forward they're going to keep getting it.
And do you mean so for instance, my clients are just getting divorced, so they're
Mm-hmm.
not going to have received the spousal maintenance for 2 years.
Yeah, they
Um,
need to have it for the 2 years, 2 years consistently, and then they'll be able to go ahead and get it to use it for the income extra.
wow, okay. So I know there are some mortgages where people can have the spousal maintenance for
Mm-hmm.
as little as 3 months or 6 months.
Yeah,
Uh,
there's some that you could do that. Yep.
yeah,
But like I
depending.
said, it depending which product they fall into.
Okay. Okay. Yes. Okay, good. Because I'm like, has my other information been bad? Um,
No, it's not. It just depends on which product they end up going into. That's kind of how that works. Yeah.
oh, okay. So as little as 3 months of spousal maintenance or as much as 2 years of spousal maintenance. Uh,
Yeah. You want to see something sturdy so that way you can feel that, you don't have to worry about them. But I know a lot of times, when people get spouse maintenance or either alimony, like you said, they do get it for a pretty long time, especially if they've been with that partner for long term. So,
oh, so you're talking the length of the spousal maintenance.
mhm.
Oh, so I was talking about how long have they already have to have been receiving that spousal maintenance? Like,
Oh yeah, no, they could get 6 months. Yeah, 6 months should be pretty good for them to show that they're receiving it. Yep.
okay. So the 3 to 6 months. Okay. And
Yes.
then, yeah. And so you can have the spousal maintenance though be for as little as 2 years in length, and it
Mm-hmm.
will still qualify.
Correct.
Oh, okay. So that's even less than with the child support then. So that's
Mm-hmm.
that's great. Um, and you know, most of my clients, their spousal maintenance is only 2 years. It's just enough to get them like back on their feet and you know, because they've been a stay-at-home mom for, you know, like 5 years, 10 years. But you know, they did have a career before that, or they had a college degree before that. So I
Mm-hmm.
would say like 2/3 of my clients, the spousal maintenance is just 2 years.
Okay.
But then, you know, the other, you know, third of my clients have been stay-at-home moms for 10 to 20 years, and they didn't have a career before that, and they don't have a college degree. So they were completely financially dependent on their husband, or could be wife too. Um, and so then, you know, they're going to be getting spousal maintenance for 5, 10, 20 years. Um, and so then, yeah, they would have way more length of time than necessary to qualify to refinance the home.
That's really nice.
Yeah. And so do you have any tips for people about refinancing your mortgage in general? And then any tips for people about refinancing your mortgage when you're getting divorced?
Yeah, so I think with refinancing, it's always good to seek advisors like a mortgage lender or a financial advisor or either your attorneys, especially if you know you're getting divorced or either if you're getting married, it's the same way. We all have to look at all your financials together to make sure that that's something that we can do for you, or at least prepare you with the documentation that you need, because a lot of times people don't think they need any legal documentation. Like for instance, like just because I'm married and I'm not with the person and they're separated, it doesn't mean that I don't need paperwork to prove that we're in separation situation. So things like that, it's like legal documentation that has to go through for the financial piece to be approved. And so for us to do this, we need to have these documentation. So I always tell people either seek somebody 2 3 months ahead of time, get some advices, don't wait last minute when you think it's gonna about to get really ugly in this divorce or whatever the situation is, and then not being able to take over the home, or not even being able to get your credits with not getting the income to get the property, because sometimes we have situation where the mom is like, I'm self-employed, but then I only started my business about a year or something and I work at home, but then I moved into this property and then now I can't buy it. So situation like that, it's always wise enough to say 3 6 months even ahead of time to have all the paperwork and things done. Because I'm sure even in the court orders, it takes a while to file something and get it to come back from the court. So it's not one of those things that's done really fast. So prepare yourself, right? Um, and then it's the same with getting married, prepare yourself when you're making this joint decision, you're doing all these joint things, right? So now you're coming together. There's like name changes, there's like so many things financially that you're doing together, so when you're making those decisions as a household, as a family, you want to make sure that, who wants to be on the mortgage or do you not want to be on the mortgage, like have these conversations with your partner. So that way you can make things work for yourself ahead of time.
Yeah. And so one thing, when you talk about being legally separated, um, some people think that it's easier to get legally separated than it is to get divorced, and it is completely not. Legal separation is just as big of a court process as divorce is. The only difference between being legally separated and divorced is that you're technically married if you're legally separated, but your financial stuff is all separate, but you're still married. And so you can't like go marry somebody else. I mean, hopefully you don't want to right away anyways, but and it's just as long as of a court process. And another thing with getting legally separated versus divorced is if you want to get legally separated, I don't handle that. And I'm going to have to refer you to an attorney. And attorneys charge anywhere from $275 an hour to $550 an hour. And attorneys, an attorney can only work for one party. So that means you and the other person will have to have an attorney. And so, we're talking like at least $10,000 to get divorced. To get separated. So if you went through a separation, again, you're still going to be married. And so like, if you want to get divorced, you're going to have to go through a divorce, and it's going to take like, the same amount of time as it would to get divorced. And it's going to cost more because I won't be able to help you with that. And I'll have to refer you to an attorney. So, the only reason you'd want to be legally separated versus divorced is if for like religious reasons, or to maybe stay on somebody's health insurance. Those would be two reasons you might want to do that. But yeah, if your real goal is to move on from that person and be financially separated from that person, then divorce is what you want to do. And divorce is what I can help with. And, at a lot less than $275 to $550 an hour. And then do you have any tips for people who want to refi the mortgage when they're like still in the divorce process?
I've had some clients who comes in and they are still in the middle of the divorce. And a lot of times we always make sure they seek counsel, with their attorneys or whoever they're working with right now, because a lot of times everything that has to do with title at the end of the day, those are legal transactions, just like purchase agreements are legal transactions. And so it's something we don't want to be advising in a situation that, we can't counsel on. So a lot of times I always tell them, I say, please talk to your attorney or your counsel, because they're the one who's going to be doing these final legal documentation, and then once that's finalized, then we can move to the next step with me being able to handle things, because I need those documentation anyways, to be able to move forward. So a lot of times if I don't have them, I can't really do much with it anyways, besides advise them, get them, kind of get them pre-qual, right? I would say we could do pre-qualification. It's not a real qualification, but it's just us adding numbers and income and debts and stuff like that to try to figure out if that there's a possibility that you can have the home under your name by yourself and not have to have another person on it. So if that's possible, we can look into that. But if not, then we need to look at option. If it's selling and then buying again, sometimes that happens. That ends up being that way. Everybody has to move. So
Yeah. And so the moral of the story here is, get information from both a mortgage banker and a legal person, either myself or an attorney, if you are in a divorce situation where the other party is not at all amicable. And V can get you pre-qualified, just to use the numbers and see if you, theoretically would qualify for it. And then during mediation, if you guys haven't already decided, she or he can keep the house, they have the pre-qualification and, decided what you want to do, then we're going to hash through what are the possible scenarios. And you are going to need information from a mortgage banker to look at all the possible scenarios during mediation. So thanks, V, for being with me tonight. And I didn't see any questions in the chat box. Now, in the future, if you have any questions about anything that V and I said, then please email or call us. Our contact information is going to be in the post shortly. So again, any questions, we both offer a no cost initial consultation, and we would love to answer your questions. Thanks for your time tonight and have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.